Hello, everyone, one and all. Welcome to Canadian music in the 80s and 90s and more. That's the Canadian part. Thanks for joining me. I'm very, I'm very happy to be joined by, I consider him a broadcast legend in Canada, Mr. Stu
Hmm.
Jeffries, currently the morning host at Boom 97.3 out of Toronto. How long have you been doing that now?
Mornings there for about 12 years. And I would say radio in general since 1979. So I'm coming on 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it goes.
So I remember hearing on the air a while ago, not a few days ago, actually, you were talking about how you got interested in radio. Would you mind giving us a little story about that?
Sure. That was World Radio Day, I think I was talking about. And yeah, I always sort of had I didn't realize my passion for it would take me actually into it. When I was a kid, I was fascinated with the radio. I often tell the story of my mother, who single mom, she raising four kids, getting up in the morning to go to school. We would come into the kitchen in our small apartment, and the cereal bowls or porridge or whatever would be waiting at the table. And my mother would be percolating coffee and, basically telling it to hurry up, scrambling to get everybody going. And on top of the bread box in the kitchen was this small black transistor radio. And she had it on all the time at quite a low volume. You really had to pay attention. But she had it on all the time. And to me, in my particular seat in the chair, it would be just off over my shoulder. And so I was getting constant, music and talk from this radio. It was she listened to CJOB in Winnipeg at the time, which I think now is a chorus owned talk station. But at the time in
Mhm.
Winnipeg, they were kind of a combination sort of talk music sort of format. But anyway, can't remember what the name of the morning guy was, but I remember being fascinated by hearing this guy talk, and it was like, although I wouldn't be able to articulate it then as a kid. I think what was fascinating me was this guy was joining us, and we had no idea who he was, and I found that just magical. And then they play a song, and I thought that they had bands in the studio would come in and do a song, and then the band would leave, and then the next band would come in and do a song. I'm going, how do they do that, man? Like, that's pretty incredible. Um, and I remember just from that point on, just being so fascinated with it. I used to get bronchitis a lot as a kid. I'd be sort of laid up in bed for a bit, sometimes, 4 or 5 days, maybe a little longer. And I would never leave my bed. I shared a bedroom with my brother, my older brother. I would never leave my bed. I was too scared to get out of there. And I would just stay in bed and listen to the radio. And then I would make my own charts or follow along on a chart that I got from the newspaper, from the station I was listening to, and realizing that I got hooked, man. Like, I had it. It was, I guess it was still, and it is to this day still magical to me. But listening to the transistor radio underneath my pillow at a very low volume, so my mother wouldn't come in and tell me to put it away. Falling asleep, waiting for a song, and then waking up and hearing that song being played in the middle of the night was just like, oh, it's okay. He knew I knew he was going to play it for me, and it kind of became my friend. And when I realized later, like, I had no idea that I could do this. I thought it was for special people. I didn't think that it's just, I don't know
Right.
how and how special you had to be, but all I knew as a kid was I would never do that. They'd never take me. Then when I realized that you could do it for a living and that there were avenues you could take to do that, um, man, I jumped all over it and got my first job in Yorkton, Saskatchewan at CJGX in 1979 after being rejected by just about every station you can imagine in northern Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And then that sort of began it. So the fascination remains, and I love it still. And it's been very good to me. And I think I've been very good to it. And we make a good pair.
You definitely have been very good to it. I always look forward to you hosting the Canada Day countdown every year.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
I really look forward to that, and and it's obviously all across the country on all the Stingray stations because
Right.
I'm here in Charlottetown, and I get to listen to it here as well. So,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, thank
um,
you.
so what kind of music were you kind of getting into back then when you first started listening to the radio? Was there anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, I was then, and I still am now, firmly in the mainstream. I love a good pop song, and a good rock song, and a good classic rock song, and it's what I know, and it's kind of in my blood. So as I'm a kid, let's say it's 19, I'm 6 years old in 1966. So you figure it out, man. I mean, there's a lot of good music on the
Yeah,
radio at that time. So I'm listening to Beatles, I'm listening to Elvis, um, I'm listening to just sort of random one-hit wonder type acts. Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I was so into Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
yeah,
Chicago, Lighthouse. Um, but and pretty much everything that my older brother was in, and I think anybody that's had an older sibling, you remember the music that they played that you weren't allowed to touch, and they played, and
yeah,
you became sort of, enamored with it. My older brother was into the Guess Who, and of course, if you're in Winnipeg, if you're not into the Guess Who, then you are not really from Winnipeg. Like,
yeah.
get out of here. I was talking about the Guess Who the other day to a couple of guys, and in Winnipeg. The Guess Who, very proud. Randy and Burton, of course, very, very proud
Yeah,
to be from there. They lived. They had an album called "So Long Bannatyne," which was the street they lived on, and one of the lines in the lyric was "Hello to my new Chevrier home" when they would move to Chevrier Boulevard or whatever.
right.
It's so funny. Winnipeg. I don't know what the population of Winnipeg is, but the entire population insists that they lived next door to the Guess Who and heard them jamming. It's like, I don't know if that's possible, but okay. So my brother, yeah, it's totally into Creedence and the Guess Who and Black Sabbath, Zepp. So whenever he was gone, I would just listen to his on his really crappy sort of record player. I love how that suitcase type record
Yeah,
player that's available now. Crosley, I think, makes them that
yeah,
become so in fashion. I've got three boys and they all want one. Like, it's magic, right? But I remember, slipping on a 45 on there, that listening to a Guess Who track or whatever my brother had. And I was fortunate to have a really good friend named Donnie Cran in Winnipeg who lived not far from me. He was also totally into radio, really into music. And this guy, um, and of course, I didn't know it at the time, but this guy's obsession was the time of records and the intro time. And I had no idea why, but you would give him a song and he would say, yeah, that's 314 with a 7-second intro. And you're like, crazy. And I never picked up on that at all. But I remember just thinking that's a fascinating sort of thing to be obsessed with. And then here it served me well when I got into radio.
yeah,
Suddenly, all of these times and intros began to mean something to me. Anyway, Donnie had a great music collection. He always had money. I never had any money. So I would go
yeah.
record shopping with him and, he would buy stuff and we'd go listen to it. And he had an older brother named Dennis who had a huge box of 45s that he had. And whenever Dennis was out of the house, we raided that box, man, and played like, oh man, that guy was, I remember listening to when he got Sergeant Pepper. We listened to that, Donnie and I, just lying on his living room floor listening to that on that huge console record player TV combo that he had. And Dennis was into some really, he was all over the place, into the Four Seasons and the Four Tops and the Temptations and the Beatles and Zeppelin. And so you get into that box of four and one hit wonders. I can still see the label to the Circles Red Rubber Ball and American Breeds, Bend Me, Shape Me. Like, I mean, we just devoured music. And Donnie and I eventually started creating our own little radio shows together, using his cassette player and the microphone up to the speaker and really primitive stuff. But I remember that's having the most fun doing that. And again, still not realizing that I could do this for a living. It wasn't for a few years later when I heard about a broadcasting school, and I thought I got to do this, and then off I go. So I really do. I haven't talked to Donnie in years, like years and years and years, and we connect on Facebook every so often. But I owe him a lot for where I am now.
Now, seeing as you've been in the business for 50 years,
Mhm.
could you talk about the different formats you've had to use over the years? Like, I mean, I know you probably did actually start out playing records in the studio.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I I I'm so fortunate to have been in this business a while, and not only to be employed, but I feel so fortunate that was able to work in the glory days of all these formats. Like I worked in the
Mhm.
glory days of AM when AM radio was still viable and when AM radio was playing music and thriving. Right now, it's not just an oldies format or something to be shuttered or
Right.
make it news and talk, and that's all there is. I mean, AM stations competing against each other in Winnipeg was a thing, man. And I had my favorite station, and it was all on the AM dial. When
Yeah.
FM kind of came around, I was still starting. Yeah, I'm still going to listen to AM. Um, and my first station in Yorkton, I'll never forget walking into that control room. Like the place was a dump. It was in the it was kind of a portion or shared the property was shared with a movie theater next door, the Tower Theater, and it was just it had been there for years, and you could tell. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just gross. But you walk into the studio and you're like, this studio's got some stories to tell, man. Like
Yeah.
you know that a lot of history went down there. And I remember they had the giant turntables, and you would put a record on, put the stylus on the record, and then you'd have to cue it up almost a full turn and a half. If you didn't cue it up that much, you would hit the button, it would be like, and then the song would start up. So you had to be, and then you had to take that minute and a half. So that's, or a circle and a half, that's about a second and a half delay. So you had to count on that when you were doing your show. Remember, when I
Right.
want to hit the song, but I got to time it out so it starts as soon as I start talking or whatever. Um, and there was a combination of vinyl, played a lot of vinyl, and also carts. So those were, for those not familiar, they look like little 8 tracks. And they would play an individual song or a multiple of 30-second or 60-second commercials, have a label on the card to tell you what it was, what the intro time was,
Right.
what category it might be filed in, and all of that. So from Yorkton, I went to Regina at CJME in Regina, and then not a lot of vinyl played there and a ton of carts. So I went from that and another AM station that was just rocking in Saskatchewan. Um, and then sort of moved through the years where it became CDs. And then, CDs sort of jumped into digital. And now, a studio now at a radio station is pretty bare, I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty much all done on screen. And but I'm happy to have had those skill. I mean, I remember, recording phone calls and stuff on reel to reel and having to splice that tape together to make it work. You always had to have a grease pencil and a razor blade, and I could still do it today, which is great. I don't know why I would, but could still do it. So I'm really sort of happy that I got, to play in that sandbox as it evolved. And I just it just feels like I've had this well-rounded career in terms of that. And I'm
Yeah.
and TV is the same thing, man. When I got the Good Rockin' Tonight job, TV was a national TV show was still a really cool thing to have. Right now, it's sort of like it's cool to have, but it's everybody can be on TV anywhere, anytime, anyhow. Right? Look at us, we're doing it right now.
Yeah.
So back then, of course, it wasn't that easy and that accessible. And thank God they didn't have social media when I was doing TV. They would have ripped me to shreds. So it's like to know that I was able to do all that, um, uh, at a time when it was all, videos were starting to be popular and everything. And I was on that roller coaster too. So, and all those formats throughout my career, I'm just so happy I was able to do it. Love it.
Because I'm fascinated with radio, although I never worked in it. I've done some work in
Right.
TV myself, but I was always fascinated by watching WKRP and the Wolfman on Hilarious House of Frightenstein, and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
messy his record collection was, and that
Yeah.
little,
Yeah.
and I always wondered how close
First,
that was to real radio.
Oh man, first of all, let me just say when WKRP first came on, and I remember watching that first episode, and um, of course, here's me wanting to get into radio, right? And just now there's a TV show about a radio station, like let's
Yeah.
go. And when Andy Travis came in and said we're going to make a few changes, and he unrolled that poster of Kiss and
Oh yeah.
tacked it onto the bulletin board, and Fever, there's a look of panic in his face at first because he doesn't think he can do rock and roll anymore. And then, but there's
Yeah.
also a look of, are you kidding me? Are we going to do this? That to me is what I die for that. Like that to
Yeah.
me is what radio is all about, that excitement and that we are about to rock and, so cool. And, You get asked that a lot. How close is it to the real thing? It's very, very close.
Was
It's a
it? Yeah.
madhouse. It's a total madhouse. You mature and, obviously you don't do the ridiculous, crazy things you did when you were younger, but it
Right.
is a very all for one for all type of feel, type of attitude.
Right.
And I guess, as you sort of work your way up through the ranks, or you work from market to market, it becomes a little more serious, a little more,
Right.
ratings mean everything. Numbers are absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Um, all of that stuff, but it's not enough to take the fun out of what you do. Boom. I remember, pardon me, one of the things I loved about this station when it used to be Easy Rock,
Okay.
97.3 Easy Rock. Colleen and I used to do the morning show there, and then they made some big changes, and my contract wasn't renewed, so I was out the door, and they had a new show go in my stead, and I was sort of relegated back to doing weekends and whatever. But I never, lost the drive. I never lost.
Yeah.
I just swore, no, I'll be back. This is one of the things that radio does, and you got to suck it up and, and go forward. But when the radio station was sold to Bell, Bell immediately got rid of it, and the Bell took whatever stations they wanted, and
Yeah.
they left us behind. And there was an attitude within that building at that moment where it's like, hey, you don't want us? We're going to make you sorry that you didn't take us. And it
Yeah.
became this very all for one thing again. And it was so, so exciting. It flipped over to Boom. And, it is one of the most successful stations in the city and in the country. Again, so proud and so happy to have been on that roller coaster too, because that was really cool. It reminded me of the old days when it's like, charge, we're underdogs. Let's prove them wrong.
Yeah, it's great to see you back on top again. Like, I mean, the morning show has got to be like the highlight show of any radio station, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just so good and so fun. I mean, there's the only drawback of the entire thing is, you're at the peak of your profession, but you got to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to
Right.
to enjoy that peak of your profession, right? And that's crazy. And that certainly takes its toll after a while. As you get older, you just can't do, a lot of the things that you want. It's like, I'd love to go see a concert, but man, I
Yeah.
can't stay up past 10 o'clock. I gotta get to bed, right? Whereas, 24-year-old Stu is all right, let's go. We're up until 1 in the morning. I'm up at 3. I can do this.
Yeah.
Uh, and now, I keep saying I'm lucky, and it's not some sort of, wellness practicing gratitude thing. It is really true. I'm lucky and fortunate. I have a bunch of bosses that love what I do, and trust me, and give me room to put a little different spin on mornings. I mean, I'm not, reinventing the wheel or anything, but I'm allowed to do some things that are important to me, to tell some stories and to address some situations, and have the wiggle room to
Yeah.
stop down for about 3 minutes and talk about something, something that's important to me, or something I feel that might be important to you, or whatever. And
Right.
bless them, like, they let me do this, and not a lot of stations would, just because it's not what they do, and that's cool. But these guys do, and it also makes me feel like I'm doing something just a little bit more than the
Yeah.
standard morning show. I still have fun, love being stupid, nothing like it, love the music. But also, when I'm able to stop down and talk about some things, it's like, I'm so lucky and so glad I can do it. And it makes me feel like I'm contributing in a different way. And if it was to all end tomorrow, I would feel like, man, I think I really accomplished something there, and maybe left some memories behind. So
For sure. Like, I mean, right off the bat, tell me something good is what I look forward to listening to.
yeah,
It's nice to hear something positive every morning,
yeah,
that kind of stuff. Can I go back to your when you got on Good Rockin' Tonight? Because that's where I first
sure,
remember you from, obviously.
sure.
Um, I also remember it was at a time I was talking to my wife about this the other day. Um, when I was growing up in Southern Ontario, by the way, I live in PEI now, just so you know. Um,
Right,
anyway, when I was growing up in Southern Ontario, much music was not free on basic cable. You
right,
had to pay for it. So I got my
right,
music videos from Toronto Rocks, Samantha
right.
Taylor's
Okay,
video hit, and Good Rockin'
right.
Tonight. That's the way I could see my
Nice,
music videos. So I
Nice.
stayed up Friday night to watch your show, and of course it was Terry David Mulligan at first. When did you get approached to do that show?
It was what was it like? I think I started in '85. And
Mhm.
Terry, I think, was on the air in '83. So yeah, I think he did it for like a year and a bit.
Right.
And then it happened in Regina, and I will never forget this day. I was at CJME, and I'm in a little staff area, and on the bulletin board, there's a notice from CBC Regina saying they're looking for a host to audition for a show called The Fame Game, which was Battle of the Bands. And what CBC had set up was in all the capital cities of the country, they would have a Battle of the Bands from each city. There'd be two shows. They'd be broadcast nationally, and it would be the bands from that city or from that province duking it out against each other, and then they move on to the playoffs and all of that. So the Regina installment was produced by Steve Glassman, and Steve is Humble Howard Glassman's brother. And
Oh, okay.
I met him. I wasn't even going to go. I saw the audition notice, and I kind of laughed and I went, "Yeah, right, forget it. I'll never do that." And as I was saying that, uh, the guy that was doing Drive in Regina at the time, Dave Mitchell, was walking down the hall, and he looked at me, and goes, "What's so funny?" I said, "Oh, this they were looking for auditions for a host at CBC." And he said, "Well, I'm going." And he said, "I'm going to audition. And if I'm going, you're going." So I said, "Okay, fine, I'll do it. What the heck?" And I got there, and I'll never forget it was a very small room. There's a woman, a production assistant with a stopwatch. There's a camera staring right at you. And all they wanted you to do was talk for 5 minutes about anything, but don't stop. Just keep talking. Even if you run out of things to say, just got to keep. So what they were seeing is, are you fast on your feet?
Yeah.
Do you look good on camera, I guess? And are you able to carry 5 minutes if we need to carry 5 minutes?
Right.
So I just started talking about what I knew, which was radio and how I loved it and how I got in it and whatever. And I was blathering on. And then at one point I went, I guess that's about it. And she hit her stopwatch, and it was 4 minutes and 55 seconds. So she said, "That's pretty good." And I didn't think anything of it. I was thought of what an opportunity. That was fun. I was too dumb, too stupid to be scared. It was just let it all out. And then a couple of days later, I got the call from Steve Glassman saying, "We'd like you to be the host." As soon as I saw it, I thought you were the guy. So I did the show, got my first taste of just how unbelievably slow TV can be and how unbelievably exciting it can be at the same time. Like when it's time to go and you get that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing, you're jazzed, man. Like you're jacked. You're ready to go.
Yeah.
It may be a false start. You might have to get jacked again, but there's something exciting about that. On the stage, uh, Dana Radford's band, Noise and the Boys, was there, and I remember I loved Dana. And the Northern Pikes were one of the Battle of the Bands guys on
Really?
that show. Oh yeah, I can't remember who won. There's another band out of Montreal called Motet. I don't know why I still remember that, but I do. Um, anyway, so they broadcast the show, and it's national. So the producer of Good Rockin' in Vancouver, Ken Gibson, saw the show that I did, and I guess just put it aside, thinking maybe down the road he could use me for something.
Mhm.
And then the next thing I know, I get a call saying, "Would you be interested in auditioning to host Good Rockin'?" And I had sort of seen the show, but not really. Um, and I was so radio dude. And when videos came out, I was very anti videos because I hated the idea of now
Yeah.
this song that you have an idea of what it's about is now put in front of you, and that's what it's about. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like they're now showing you the song. And I was like, nah, I don't like that. But Ken said it's a good opportunity. And of course it was. And so I went down to audition, and so did a bunch of other people. And I ended up getting the job. And 8.5 years later, they wrapped it up. I owe Ken a lot. I owe CBC Vancouver a lot. I learned so much, not only about TV, but about me and what I'm capable of and my limits and, recognition, how to carry yourself. It's
Hmm.
so much more than just hosting a show. Like people recognize you. I've never been to, at that point, I'd never been to Halifax. I went to Halifax and people recognize you at the airport and want your
Right.
autograph. It's really weird. Like it's
Yeah.
cool, I guess, but it's weird. And that's, I guess, another thing I liked about radio. There's a certain anonymity where you're
They don't know what you
behind the
look
mic.
like.
Yeah, that's right. Although now it's so easy. You can find out what I look like. I can find out what you look like no
Yeah,
problem. We'll go to Facebook, go online, I'll find you. Yeah.
yeah.
But then not so much. But and again, part of that gratitude of being part of TV and videos when they were hot and when having a national show was a really big deal. Um, so glad to have been able to do that.
Um, so being TV and radio all these years, can you go over some of the you've done probably countless number of interviews with probably a lot of your heroes. Um,
Oh yeah.
and you probably broke a lot of bands too, which is what I'm really interested in. Like I'm also interested in what these bands that were out back in the day do now. I'm really interested in that.
Yeah.
I like hearing a new Northern Pike song. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
really into that. Like not just what they did 30 years ago. I want to hear what they're doing now. But
Yeah. Yeah.
who would you say you like? Who were some of the interviews and bands you broke, and who are some of the heroes that you've been like absolutely enamored with when you met them or interviewed them?
Yeah. I don't know if I could say that I was sort of in any way responsible for breaking a band. But I will say through radio and through a lot of good rock, and we got behind a lot of acts and that
Yeah,
were new and got big. Like Glass Tiger comes to mind right away. I always feel like uh, Glass Tiger and I tell that to the guys whenever we see each other. That is that we kind of grew up together. Of course, in terms of their success, I mean,
right.
forget it. I'm way over here and they're way up there, but we kind of went through the same ranks
Yeah,
together, and it was sort of cool. I feel like they've been sort of part of my career, like a career buddy. I would say the same thing about Bare Naked Ladies too, where I feel like I just
yeah.
grew up with these guys. We were there together. Um, so in terms of getting behind them, absolutely. Glass Tigers one, Bare Naked Ladies another, Platinum Blonde.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of Canadian acts that we really, I mean, this CBC's mandate, right? A lot of Canadians. So,
Right.
we got behind whoever we could. Uh, I'm of course, a blank out in Northern Pikes. Yeah. Um, uh, but yeah, I've never got a chance to talk to Rush, which is one of those big disappointments. I would have really liked to have said,
Yeah,
yeah, talk to Getty, talk to Alex, whatever. Um, but yeah, so behind you name a Canadian act in the 80s, we were behind it. Frozen Ghost. And I like when you were talking about you like to hear a new song from those artists. I love the Sheriff Frozen Ghost,
yeah,
story where Sheriff releases When I'm With You in 1981 or 82 or something like that. And it does okay on Canadian radio and then it disappears. Then some jock in like Phoenix or something finds the record, puts it on the air years later and gets a ton of calls and people love the song. It goes to number one in the States. Freddie
yeah,
Curchie, who sang vocals on that song, is a Purelator driver or something like that. He hears it on the
yeah,
radio again that he's number one, ends up forming another band called Alias, and Freddie takes a song that's very similar to When I'm With You back to the top of the charts again too. I
yeah,
love that whole thing. Um, but as far as heroes are concerned, man, well, first of all, I love Trooper. Trooper will be, and I only got a chance to talk to Ray once on Good Rockin', but since then I'm happy to call him a friend. He's
yeah,
just such a good dude. And Brian Smith from the band. Um, I grew up with them as a kid. If Trooper was in concert, I was there. If I could get front row, I was in the front row. I just loved their band, loved their music. They were different
yeah.
than any kind of other Canadian act at the time. I couldn't really articulate how, but it was just their music was just so good. Uh, so talking to Ray and actually having an interview with him on Good Rockin' and being able to tell him what that music meant to me
Right.
um, means a lot. Loverboy, I will say the same thing. Talking to Mike Reno and Paul Dean, they have I don't know. There's still a place in my heart in terms of I don't know, just growing up with that kind of music. Burton Cummings and Randy Bachman, of course, mega heroes that I've got to talk to a few times, and the Guess Who and all of that. So I would say those are my heroes to have met them. Also, Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits,
Oh
so
yeah,
not Canadian, but Mark. I kneel at the Church of Knopfler. He's incredible. Dire Straits. The first time I heard Sultans of Swing on the radio, I was like, "Oh my
yeah,
God, what is this?" And that guitar solo at the end,
Oh,
get out of here. So
yeah.
to be able to talk to Mark when he was on tour on the On Every Street tour was great. Talk to Michael Hutchins from INXS,
Mhm.
who, man, that guy just had rock just exuded from him, you know. And it was a tragedy that he's no longer with us. I don't know. He just had he was rock and roll. He was pretty freaking cool. And of course, I mean, tops for me is Paul McCartney too. Have been able
Oh
to
yeah.
talk to him for 20, 25 minutes when he was on the Flowers in the Dirt tour in Montreal. Highlight for me. Still have a picture of me and him together. Um, I remember I remember sitting down with a bunch of questions. I mean, my producer was in my hotel room before the interview and we were going over questions, and he said, well, obviously we got to talk about the Beatles. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but like he's talked about the Beatles so much, like, he's probably going to get so pissed off. But we had some questions ready. I asked him the first question. I can't even remember what it was. And he basically took me through the entire Beatles era all the way up to where he is now in like a perfect 2 minute soundbite. It was like, but I remember
That's awesome.
as he's talking, I'm nodding and nodding. And in my head, I'm going, holy shit, I'm talking to Paul
Paul
McCartney.
McCartney.
Like, yeah, it's like, are you kidding me? Get out of here. Uh, so yeah, heroes and fans, and they always there's a saying that say you don't want to meet your heroes because they could let you down. I don't think I've ever been let down from anybody that I've met,
Right.
fortunately. I caught people on some bad days, but
Yeah.
never let down.
I know what you mean. I met Gordon Lightfoot a few years ago at a Stomp and
Oh,
Tom birthday party,
legend.
and I just wanted to go
Yeah,
up and shake his hand and say I met him. But he
yeah,
liked the hockey sweater I was wearing. I was wearing an old Mississauga Ice Dogs OHL jersey, and he talked to me about hockey for
right.
45 minutes. And I'm just like,
I
wow.
know. This is
Like,
Gordon Lightfoot. Yeah,
yeah, at a couple of times I was like, I was enamored with what he said because he was really knowledgeable about hockey. But I'm like, this is Gordon Lightfoot.
yeah, yeah. It was so cool. And I had a chance to talk to him, and I remember, for me, Gordon uh, will always, the line that echoes in my head is the Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, where
Right.
the line is, does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours? That to me is one of the most powerful lines ever delivered in any song,
Yeah.
anywhere, anyhow. You hear that line and you are there in the water with them. Like, it is like, oh
Yeah.
my God, who comes up? And to be able to say to him during the interview, I said, I just want to tell you this. And he said, yeah, he said that was a good line. And he also said that basically the Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, when it came time to record it, they did it in one take. And I'm like, are you kidding
Yeah.
me? And he said, well, there was a certain urgency to it. They wanted to get it out, but the band was ready. Everybody was ready. And he was like, let's just do this. And like, can you imagine that track in one take? Now I'm sure they made some adjustments and stuff, but still
Yeah.
that track in one take, get out of here. Like, oh, it's like, talk about meant to be, right?
He was a real wordsmith with so many of his songs, wasn't he? Like, I mean, just
Mm,
you listen to how well crafted his lyrics were in so many of his great songs,
yeah.
you're just like, wow, like, I mean, what's it like to be able to
Yeah.
write like that? Like, it's just
And
unbelievable.
there's a lot of pain in those songs too, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, you like, even Sundown, you can hear there's a
Yeah.
bit of pain in there. There's Daylight Katie, there's pain, there's Carefree Highway, there's tons of pain, and yet also
Yeah.
beautiful music to go along with it. Yeah, crazy.
Just unbelievable. I mean, there's a lot of artists like that, but none really topped the way he was when it came to writing words and
Facts.
stuff like that and putting the right music to it as well. I guess that was another.
Facts.
I mean, there's a lot of
Oh, I
guys like
mentioned
that.
just to mention another one as well too. Another group that I was a fan of and still am. Tom Cochrane and Red Rider.
Ah,
Um,
yes.
I did when I was in York and I saw Red Rider for the first time, and I believe they backed up April Wine. I want to say, I'm not
Okay.
sure on that. Um, and got to MC the show at the Yorkton Agriplex. So you're standing on stage in front of like 9,000 people. It's pretty wild. And I brought him on, and I had already listened to "Don't Fight It" front to back. That was an amazing, amazing album, and loved every song. And I did my own little special after a phone interview I did with Tom. I kind of worked it into this little special, and I wanted to give it to him backstage at the show so he could hear it, just because I was really proud of it and I thought that he would like it.
Yeah.
And I remember he took it backstage after his show. He took it and he goes, "That's great. I'll bring it to our management." He was managed by Bruce Allen at the time. And of course, I believed that that would happen. And then I would be this great radio show producer. I never heard anything back from him, but still, and I still have. I found it the other day on cassette. It's pretty cool to listen to. And love him and love, Tom is just like, Tom's an amazing singer songwriter. And his music, but that guy reps Canada like very
Oh, for
few.
sure.
And yeah, and he's pretty amazing.
And what a body of work too. Like,
Yeah. Whew,
just
yeah.
unbelievable. And I think he's one of Canada's best songwriters too. I'd put him right up there with
Without
anybody.
question.
Um,
Without question. Yep.
I was actually going to ask you, like, I've been doing this for fun, and I've try hard not to fan out sometimes. Because I
Right.
interviewed Kevin from the Grapes of Wrath the other night, and that was really hard for me
Oh,
not to
cool.
fan out. Barney Bentall's always been one of my favorites as well. Um,
Great guy. Great
but
guy. Yeah.
when you were in Vancouver in the mid to late '80s, there was a really big scene going on there, not with just with Canadian bands, but I mean, they had Little Mountain Sound, had all those big bands recording there over the years and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Like, did you get a feeling of how big everything was back at that time in Vancouver?
For sure. And I would say that when you're in it, like when you're actually working in it, I don't know if you obviously don't appreciate it. You're doing your job, right? So
Right.
you don't really know kind of what you're in until you look back and you go, "Holy cow, we did that!" Little Mountain Sound, legendary, and not very far from where CBC's building was at the time in Vancouver. So I remember walking out the back door of CBC with my producer Ken Gibson, and we were going to Little Mountain to talk to John Bon Jovi and Richie
Oh, wow.
Sambora,
Yeah.
and they were laying down the tracks for Slippery When Wet at that time. So I remember talking with Ken, and I'm going, "Who's Bon Jovi?" Like, and there was a little bit of background on him. They had like that Fahrenheit, 4800 Fahrenheit. I can't remember the album. Very
Yep.
little known about these guys. Yeah. So I'm walking across the street and I got the record company bio in me, and I'm kind of looking it over and I'm going, I know nothing about these guys. And Ken, I remember saying something to the effect, and this guy was really good. Ken was super good. When he heard
Yeah.
a song or heard a bit, he could pick a hit. So as we
Yeah.
were going across, he goes, "I just got a feeling these guys are going to be big. So we may be using, sections of this interview for a long time. So let's make sure we do a good job."
Yeah.
And sat down with these guys in Little Mountain Sound in one of these studios where the big board is. We got the huge board, and then we got John and Richie. And man, we just had a great time. It's such fun talking, and I remember John talking about how they don't want like videos. They don't want to do. They're not actors. They don't want to
Yeah.
do acting videos. They don't want to do performance videos. They want to show everybody what Bon Jovi's all about. They don't want to. They
Yeah.
had like that video for Runaway was like, it was pretty cheesy. And there was another one. Oh, I can't even remember the name of it now. But I just made a thumbs up. Excellent. Uh, there was another song. I can't remember what the name of it was, but again, it's just so cheese. And they didn't want to do that. They just wanted to do performance. So You Give Love a Bad Name. That was them saying we're going to do it our way.
Yeah.
And you could tell the band was having fun, and it was great. But anyway, he told the story. I met him again. I did another interview again about a year and a half down the road. So Slippery When Wet had been released
Yeah.
90 million times platinum. They're now international superstars. And we met up again, and John said there was this strip club in Vancouver called Number 5 Orange. And he said when the band was recording Slippery When Wet, they'd be recording like into the wee hours, but the strip club was always open. They were reaching into their pockets, couch cushions, trying to come up with coin just to pay for a pitcher of draft beer so they could go have a few laughs, watch the girls, whatever. And he said, we had no money. Then he said, we come back to do a show in Vancouver a year and a half later. And he said, we drive by the Number 5 Orange, and on the marquee is Bon Jovi's in town. Oh my God. He said, I don't think we paid for, we went in because we had to, because it was so cool. We went in and I don't think we paid for a drink all night. He said it was just absolutely crazy. So, it's so funny how you go from here to there in no time flat. And yeah, Little Mountain's great. I had the pleasure of talking with Bruce Fairbairn. Rest in peace, Bruce, man. A producer extraordinaire. Him
Bob
telling me a
Rock.
story. Yeah, Bob Rock.
Yeah.
Fairbairn telling me a story about Aerosmith when they were in studio to do. I think the album was had "Dude Looks Like a Lady" on it, and I
Oh,
can't remember the
Permanent
name of the.
Vacation.
Yeah, permanent vacation. So they're in there recording, and Bruce is a huge fan of Aerosmith, and he's telling me the story. He says, so we're getting ready to go, and like they're late. When they show up, they're not working. He says whole lot of wasted time. And we try and lay down a track, and they'd be distracted and everything. And he said, I finally just had a meeting with them, and I said, guys, I'm a huge fan. I love this band, but this is not anything I want to do. I want to produce a band that wants to rock like they know how to rock. And he basically just gelled them together and came up with, I arguably, Aerosmith's biggest album, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's some pretty cool stuff on there. And the thought of him, a producer, being a fan of the group that he's producing and saying, this is not the group I want to produce. I want to produce Aerosmith. I want, everybody all for one. The thought of that was so cool. I loved it.
And that was the album that got them back in the game really after quite a few years.
Exactly. Yeah, because they were like, their career was skidding if it hadn't already skidded. And to see that and see they were still capable of doing,
Yeah.
still rocking. And that dude looks like a lady. Bruce telling me, he said initially it was called Cruising for the Ladies.
Yeah.
And he said it just wasn't working. And then he kind of left it up to Steven, and Steven came up with this other idea, which is pretty good. And I love that. So when it starts out being, yeah, Cruising for the Ladies, and turns into be dude looks like a lady, I'm like, all right, man, way to go.
Because they went back and did Pump there, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
Yeah, yeah. And then Bruce left us way too soon, man. It's
Yeah.
just he's had the Bob Rock touch, right? I mean, I'm sure Bob learned from Bruce. I don't know what their relationship was, but I know they probably worked together on many occasions. And man, the guy had the touch for sure, had the ear.
But there was a lot of great Canadian bands coming out of the West Coast too, like obviously Bryan Adams, Loverboy. Um, um, but even, I mean, my favorite band was always Spirit of the West. They
Right.
were they were one of my favorite bands to come out of Vancouver.
Yeah.
5440, obviously, and there was quite a
Yep.
tight knit community out there of like Canadian bands as well. Because
There
Sarah
really was.
McLaughlin was Sarah McLaughlin out
Sarah
there?
McLaughlin. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And also a very supportive community, and
yeah,
anybody from Vancouver made it because Vancouver, producer of the show of Good Rockin' Ken would tell me that Vancouver acted as the mountains around Vancouver act as a very good barrier. A
yeah,
lot of people outside of Vancouver don't know what goes on in Vancouver. And
right,
Vancouver, in a lot of ways, on some level, I think, feels kind of left out on one side. But on the
yeah,
other side is like, this is our territory, leave us alone. It's a beautiful, beautiful province.
yeah,
Um, Gorgeous. And Vancouver, I remember guys, particularly guys in the record industry who were from Toronto coming out to Vancouver with their acts, and they were like, why is everybody move so slow here? Like, why, it's hard to get anything done. Like, what's going on here? And when some of these guys moved to Vancouver, initially, I remember hearing them, they hated it. You catch up with them 6 months later, and they don't ever want to leave. It's like, this is the
yeah,
greatest place ever. But I think because of that sort of, I want to say isolation. I don't know if it's really isolation, but it's just
yeah,
that being, I think that Vancouver bands and artists are super proud when their own make it internationally or outside of those
yeah,
boundaries, right? And they're very, very supportive of each other. I mean, Adams is just like, Adams is
yeah,
ridiculous. Adams is like, he is, I don't even know if Vancouver really appreciates just how big and how much he has
right,
contributed to the music scene in this country and the world. Like,
yeah. He wears
he
Canada
would
on his
be
sleeve wherever he goes.
absolutely, he would
Yeah.
be the dude in my, what would be the biggest thing to come out of Vancouver? I'd say Adams, and I don't think you get too much of an argument.
No, for sure. And he's I can't believe that. I mean, we saw him here in Summerside 2 years ago.
Mhm.
What guy of his stature comes to Summerside?
He'll play
You
any
know,
barn, any shed.
yeah,
He is all about, you know what, get me on stage and I just want to rock. During the pandemic, he, I don't know Brian on a very personal level. And Brian is
yeah,
an interview with Brian is it's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's quite basic.
yeah,
Brian's not very forthcoming about Brian himself. I think he really feels uncomfortable talking about himself, and I'm cool with that. No problem. And he does tell a good story, but I think all Brian wants to do is rock. He wants to write and he wants to rock. And during the pandemic, when he
mhm,
was just posting videos of acoustically singing various songs and stuff, you could see the frustration. He did not want to be home. He
Yeah.
wants, even if you talk about Brian, Fits You Good from You Want It, You Got It is such a great song. He'll go, yeah, but he wants to move forward too. Like
Yeah.
yeah, no, I did that already. I've got this new stuff right now. And I dig that a lot. I love that about him. And he makes no bones about it. If he had his choice, he wouldn't talk to anybody. And he would just get on stage and rock
Yeah.
for the fans because that's what he loves to do most.
Yeah, I was actually really excited to see him because I knew Pat Stewart was playing drums with him again.
Right.
And I remember meeting him in the odds a few years back.
Ah, the odds, yeah.
And it's great to see Pat playing drums with Brian again. And I don't know how he does it because Brian never stops. Like he just
No.
keeps playing and playing.
Yeah.
And oh, I can
Yeah.
go here and tour a little bit, and I can come
Yeah.
back to Canada again and do some shows. And just he never stops.
It
Like
never stops. There's a show at Wembley that I love. I don't know what it was, probably in the 90s. Where it's Wembley, for God's sake. So Wembley's sold out. There's like 8 bajillion people there, and lights go down, crowd's going crazy, stage is absolutely empty. And you hear the first part of Summer of '69, that
yeah,
okay, and you don't even see Brian. And then he just walks out playing it. He's playing it on the guitar and walking out, and the crowd is going nuts. And you can tell that he is completely unfazed by all of this and knows that he's just there to rock and knows that they're going to dig it.
yeah,
But it's like it is his happy place. And when he steps up to the mic and says, I got my, and then stops, and the crowd starts singing the first part of Summer of '69 back at him, holy crap. Like you're like, oh my God. And yet I don't even think it phases him. It's like, Brian, do you realize that 100 bajillion people know this song by heart and are singing it back to you right
yeah,
now? It's just, I don't know. It's so cool. And I guess very Canadian in the way that he is just so humble and just happy to be there. You know, if
for
you were to
sure.
describe Canadian artists, I think at the root of their performances is just, we're just happy to be here. Thanks for coming out.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, I've seen him 5 times. The first time I saw him being at Massey Hall, and that was such a great venue to see him in such a small spot and such great sound. And
Yeah.
they were a three-piece at the time. They were all wearing white. And Brian was playing
Right.
bass. He was
Wow.
playing
Why
bass, and
not?
I was like, wow, that's crazy. But he's
Yeah.
always had Keith Scott with him, and I always think that's cool that he's been able to stick with a guy like that for
Yeah.
his whole
Yeah.
career, I think.
Yeah.
He still works with Jim Valance, I think, when he makes new
Yeah. He
music
does.
and
Yeah.
writes together. And
And
um,
just and he just I just love him because he just, as I said, he just wants to rock. Like he just wants to write and play. And he'll never settle. Like he will never settle down.
we
I
got to
mean,
get
his
him in
guy's
the
got
Rock and
kid.
Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh God, yeah. And why he's not? It's like, mind you, this morning I was talking about Foreigners not in there either, and I'm like, what is going on here, guys? Like, come
Yeah,
on. Anyway,
they talked
that's
about
a
how long
popularity
Rush had to
contest, though.
wait, right?
I know it's a popularity contest, and
It
God only
definitely
knows
is.
what politics are involved in that. And really, when you get right down to it, when you see who's in, it's great. But when you see the list of who's out, it's like, why? Um, yeah, the Rock Hall is like whatever. And I find it probably stirs up more bad feelings than good. You mean you hear
Yeah,
stories of bands that no, we're
sure.
not going to get back together because we hate each other's guts, and we're not going
Yeah,
to, it's like, what are we doing here? And that's another thing that will forever annoy me is who's in, who's not, and
yeah,
why, when you are in,
yeah,
that you can't just suck it up for 10 minutes and play 2 songs for the fans that put you there.
yeah.
Just annoys the hell out of me, but whatever.
I don't want to get started on Van Halen, my favorite band growing up, because
No,
there's too
no.
much you could say about them. But
Oh yeah, there's so much garbage, right? And I get it. You imagine working in that creative environment and being that successful, just the 4 or 5 of you, or the 3 of you, or whatever, the 2 of you, whatever it is,
yeah,
how you get on each other's nerves, and how, yeah, you may make some great music, but it's so, you hate each other's guts. It's just impossible to continue, right? Like, it's sad, but I get it because it's like, I'm so sick of your face right now. I can't do this, and we got to go out on stage and pretend we're brothers and we're rocking. Like, oh man, but I totally get it.
yeah. Man, this is great conversation. I really appreciate you doing this. I can't say enough because I love talking about
I
music. Can I get
Oh,
back to
me
the
too. I could
radio?
do it. I could do it. I could do it for ages, but yeah, go ahead.
Can I get back to the radio thing?
Sure.
The one thing that really attracted me to Boom when you guys started doing your online presence, I love still to this day behind the vinyl. It's the
Great.
most amazing thing. I go on your YouTube channel constantly to see if there's a new one up there, but I've watched everyone, I think. I love listening to those artists talk about those songs and putting the needle on the record. I think it's amazing the way they do that. Have you ever hung out
Yeah,
there when they shoot those or
I have. Yeah, and I've seen a couple. It's like Troy McCallum, a program director, is the guy that kind of sets it up and has the artists in there and sort of gives them the background. What I want to say surprises me is how, and I say this in the nicest way, is how willing the artists are to come in and drop the needle on their vinyl, like and how many comment on, I haven't done this in a long time, right? Put the needle on, and then even just playing in the background just a little bit and telling a story. It's Cochran that, to me, when he's talking about White Hot,
yeah.
he tells this amazing story through the song, and he goes, and there you go, White Hot, right at the moment where the song is over. It's like, man, you're good. You are good. But the stories, they're great, right? I mean, how the song came together, um, and you can see in their eyes as they put it on. Spandau Ballet is one of my favorite ones
Yeah.
where, Martin Kemp puts it on, and you can see that they both just started as soon as the first few notes of True, you can see them going away, like their eyes are going away to the moment where they've recorded this
Yeah.
song. And I think it's magic, man. It's magic.
It truly is. I think the most underrated storyteller is Blair Packham from the Jitters. I've
Blair's,
interviewed
and
I've
yeah, go
interviewed
ahead.
him twice. He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's got so many stories, but I think the best story is the one where he talks about how there's a guy on the cover of that album that wasn't even in the band.
Serious?
Yeah. He said their producer said, oh no, it was Dean Cameron from Capitol Records, God rest his soul, actually.
Yeah.
He said, you have to have keyboards in your band. It's like, we don't have a keyboard player. Well, you have to have a keyboard player. So they got the brother of one of the guys who doesn't play a lick of music. And he's on the cover of the album just to
Standing
have,
behind a keyboard.
yeah, yeah. It's
That's
just an
awesome.
amazing. He's got so many
That's
good stories. He actually told me a story about the sheriff thing,
right. Oh,
about
about, yeah.
they were recording the Alias album when they found out that When I'm With You went to #1. And
Oh, okay.
and they called him up and said, "You're #1 right now." It's like, we're not even finished recording the record yet. It's like, no, 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 it's
No, no, it's the
another.
others.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I can't even
Yeah.
imagine what that would be like.
I worked with Blair. We shared the same radio station, or shared the same hallways at radio when he was
Yeah.
at 1010, and I was at Easy Rock. Would see him in the hallways once in a while. He's a really good dude, man. Really good dude.
Yeah, he's full of stories. He's hilarious. He's a great interview because I don't have to say much.
Exactly.
He just
That's
runs
the
with
best,
it.
eh? That's the best, right? Yeah, ask a question and then just go, man.
Yeah, I found that with Rob Bruce from the Spoons too. Like I couldn't believe I
Right.
interviewed
Been a
him.
great guy. Gord, great guy. Sandy, just an amazing group. I love Spoons.
Another great Canadian band that I bet you guys played a lot of back in your day.
Yeah, tons, and we still play them now at Boom. I mean, there's a lot of mailbox money going out there. Boom. There's a lot of gold checks are showing up in the mail. So I'm sure these guys are pretty happy with it. We're happy to play them.
The one thing I miss a lot about radio was I remember, I don't know if it was like this across the country, but I remember a couple of stations in Toronto used to play like have specialty programming. Like they used to have
Yeah,
like a live concert once in a while.
right.
And I remember there used to be a really cool show called Rockline.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know if you
Mhm.
syndicated show called Rockline where you could actually phone in and talk to some of your favorite artists. Do you think that'll ever come
Yeah.
back to radio again?
I don't know. We as the years have gone by, we've always talked about. I mean, a friend of mine just sent me a couple of cassettes of Westwood One's Canada Day Countdown from 1986 or something that I
Oh
hosted. I
wow.
completely forgot I did it. And it goes back to a time where, yeah, specialty programming was key. I don't think there's any money in it anymore, and that's why it
No.
doesn't happen. Yeah, I think that the money that it takes to to put something like that together, and then the amount of stations that are willing to get on board. But now we're getting into like a sales thing or a barter thing that I don't understand.
Yeah.
So all I know is what I hear is when you want to try and do something and syndicate it, like I was like even a behind the vinyl, for example, how
Yeah.
about we just syndicate that? And radio stations can buy it for whatever. Radio stations don't want to buy it. It's sort of like, no.
Yeah.
And also, it kind of makes sense in another way in that we have access to all of this on our laptops, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it's not on the radio anymore, and I know where you're coming from because I appreciate those specialty programming things.
Yeah.
It felt special, right? If it was a countdown or it
Yeah.
was like you say rock line or whatever, it felt special, and you were listening on your favorite station, Casey Kasem's AT Top 40, like whatever, it felt
Dr.
really
Demento.
important. Dr. Demento, sure, yeah. But I just don't think there's any money in it. Nobody wants to spend the money to do it because they're not going to get the money back. And again, if I want to hear a countdown right now, if I want to hear Casey do a countdown from 1974,
Go
no
on
problem.
YouTube.
I can find it on YouTube, and I'm good to
Yeah.
go. So that has changed. I don't know. It's not really sad. It's just kind of this is the way things are now.
Yeah.
I think we're left with our memories of those programs, which is great. Um, I don't know that would be either beneficial or detrimental if you were to bring it back. I think you get like yourself, myself, some hardcore radio people really into it,
Yeah.
but I think at the end of the day, it just doesn't make sense.
Because there's a guy here on PEI right now. He's got a podcast called Isle Tunes, and it's all
Right.
Prince Edward Island artists, no matter
Oh,
what
that's
it
awesome.
is. And it doesn't matter what format you play or what kind of music you play. But he's trying to get it on a radio station here, and he just can't because he doesn't
Yeah.
have a blanket SOCAN license to play whatever he wants. He has to get
Well,
permission
that's a
from the
problem.
artists
Hmm.
themselves. But
Yeah.
I think it would be a pretty big hit,
Yeah.
especially here locally on PEI. Like, I mean, or I don't know if it would work in a big place like Toronto, but and then there's
Yeah.
another show called The Hoedown, which has been on radio here in PEI since 1958. And
Right.
it's by request, 3 hours every Saturday of old school country music.
Oh, wow. And
And
it still works, still
they
popular.
have tried to take it off the air, and
Uh-huh.
literally advertisers have said you can't take the hoedown off the air. It is so popular here, you would lose
That's
if you
awesome.
took it off
That's
the air.
awesome.
It's great to
That's
see that
awesome.
once in a while,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't know if it would work in a bigger market. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I like hearing
It,
that once in a while.
yeah, for sure. I mean, and there's also some comfort there too, right? Like, I mean, it's
Yeah.
been on the air for a billion years, is for sure. There, when I was in Yorkton, we used to have to do funeral announcements because there was only the newspaper in town was only a weekly. It came out every Wednesday, Yorkton This Week.
Yeah.
So if somebody died, you didn't want to wait a week to see it in the obituary. So twice a day at noon and at 5 or 6, I can't remember what the exact, I think it was 6. You would have this really low key kind of chapel time, and this big deep voice announcer would say, as a service to GX listeners, basically here's who died. So you
Yeah.
would have a list of names that you would have to read that are died, where the funeral services are being held, and so on. And then you would hit the
Wow.
chapel time extra, which is this really soft kind of thing. And then because York still my favorite, Yorkton was called a block format. So in the morning, it was pretty much middle of the road stuff, probably more country than anything else, but middle of the road. Then in the afternoon, it got a little more adult contemporary. But at night, after 6 o'clock, it rocked. It became the rock format. So, and I was doing evenings. So, of course, out of chapel time, because I'm such a jerk, out of chapel time, I'm going to come out with the rockingest song I possibly can, just because I'm an idiot and I'm a jerk, but I love it. So, you'd end up with that low key chapel time extra, and then it'd be like Whole Lot of Love or something. It's like, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to rock.
Have you
Crazy. But I was brought that up because they before that chapel time, there was a show called the Ukrainian Hour, which is only a half hour.
yeah.
Very funny in and of itself. And so many times I tried to take that off the air and people would not have it. Guy was playing half-hour Ukrainian polka music, but
That's
you would
awesome.
not, if you got rid of it, you might as well just close the station up because people would not have it. It may still be on now for all I know.
Have you heard the Casey Kasem rant?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That made
The
the
one
rounds
where,
really early in my
why do we
career.
come out
Yeah.
of these upbeat records when I got to talk about a dog dying?
I know, it's so good.
I've never heard him talk like that my whole life. I was like,
Yeah.
that's not Casey Kasem, is it?
You know what I love is that the recording engineer is probably just covering his mouth while he's recording all this, going, "This is gold. This is going to be so good."
You never know when someone's recording, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Especially, oh man, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you giving me the time, Stu. I've been itching to interview you forever.
Oh,
Um,
Alan, it's my pleasure, man. I love. I'll hook up with you anytime. People that are passionate about this industry, um, uh, that keeps me going and keeps me jazzed. I love talking to people that appreciate it and
yeah.
geek out. And yeah, I mean,
Well, you can
yeah,
see by my
you and I,
wall, I'm a big geek here. So,
yeah, you and I are the same, man. I geek out every single day, so I'm always happy to talk about it and happy to take your time to blather on.
no, I can't believe you gave me the time of day. I really appreciate it very much.
Dude, anytime,
Even
anytime.
though I live here on PEI, I still listen to you on the internet every morning at work.
Oh,
Um,
awesome. Thank you.
I live for the $1,000 minute just because I'm yelling at the radio going, how do you not know that?
I know. We have it that to me is so much fun. And as I've always said to the contestants, that if they're not laughing while they're playing it, they're missing the whole point. I
Yeah,
don't think you go in to win the $1,000. You go in just to have a little fun and see how much you can show off with
yeah,
trivia. Because every yeah, trivia is the best in that you don't have to be smart um, to play a trivia game. We all retain stupid little bits of information, some more than others. As I always say, when somebody says the questions are too hard, it's like, well, if you know, you know. And if you don't, you don't. And
yeah,
that's how trivia works, right? It's just you either know it or you don't. And listening to people play, you can hear the nerves. Sometimes they don't
yeah.
even breathe. And you're like, dude, you got to breathe because otherwise this is not going to work out well. But to hear them play and laugh, man, it makes my day. Makes my day.
I gotta thank you because before I moved out here to PEI, I did win Rolling Stones tickets from you
Get out. Where?
at
In Vancouver?
Burls Creek. The
At
one in
Pearl You did?
that last one in Ontario. I won Stones
Were,
tickets. I think you were supposed
were
to
you on the
sing.
bus?
No, I sang a song on the
Oh,
radio and I won the tickets. You were the one that called me that morning to sing a line of a Rolling Stones song, and I was
oh,
like,
that's awesome.
I don't know the words to
That's
this.
awesome. Did you, were you on the bus out to the show?
No,
Oh,
no.
okay. Because I was going to say I would have I certainly would have remembered that. So yeah, we took a bus load out. I got at Burles Creek. I left early
So
because
did we.
again, 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, and the Stones were great. But you could tell that if you
Yeah,
were wanting to get out, you weren't going to get out until like 4 or 5 in the morning. Like
I got to
it
be
was sort of
honest.
like either get
I thought Sloan was the best band of the day.
yeah. Although, I don't know. From a
The Beaches were
distance,
good though too. I really like the Beaches.
yeah, I still never get tired of seeing Mick and Keith.
No,
I
no, it was
just,
cool to say I got to see them because who knows how much
yeah.
longer they're gonna go, right? I mean, Charlie's gone
And look
now.
at Matt. Could you imagine if you're 80 and you're on stage moving like Mick is moving? Forget about it.
Uh,
Like, forget about it. That guy is freaking legendary.
he
And
really is.
Keith's defying modern science. There's no way Keith should be alive. Like, there's no way. And here he is. And I've interviewed him a couple of times, and he is the most amazing guy to talk to.
Yeah,
He is so forthcoming, so friendly, like just, and you can tell appreciates everything that has come his way. And I'm sure that every day he wakes up, he goes, "Oh, I'm still here. All right, let's go."
absolutely. Wow, that's
The
awesome.
guy fell out of a tree, a coconut tree or whatever, and fell on his head and still is alive. Guy
Oh,
smoked 18 packs a day and still smokes. Did heroin for like 1,000 years. Like there's just no way he should still be with us. And the fact that he is still rocking is like, go Keith.
well, they always say, watch what kind of world you're gonna leave for Keith Richards, right? So
Exactly. That's exactly true. Yeah. He may outlive me.
probably will. Thanks again, Stu. I really, really appreciate this. It's
Alan,
an
it's my
honor to
pleasure,
speak
man.
with you. Um, I'll be listening every morning until late.
Alan, thank you, man.
All right.
Pleasure talking with you.
Take care, Stu.
Yeah, you too, man.